Today is the 10th of July, 2022. Thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel. Like my official YouTube channel and go to my website, www.susanmulane.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. Now, I'm going to put the links, because there's two of them that I can think of right now, that will be in the information section in reference to what I'm going to discuss in my official YouTube video. Earlier in a journal blog, the Ornery PSA, through my website, www.susanmulane.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com, I had updated a lot of stuff in my journal blog as to quite a few situations that were occurring in an overall sort of way and what needed to be brought forward. Those who would know the 1980s and 1990s as to the tri-state area, which I was born and raised in New Jersey and then grew up going throughout the New York City 5 boroughs, as well as a few other locations, such as New York State, which would also include Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania, as far as that area, to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, as a normalcy as far as my childhood and my teenage years. Now, in reference to the videos that'll be in the information section, those particular videos go over a few details as to the situations regarding, one in reference to Roe v. Wade and another one in reference to the Democratic Party actually talking about something real. Now, in reference to the Democratic Party, who has been fairly commonly known as to being pro-abortion in comparison, I personally understand some reasons behind, such as for actual medical reasons. And that translation is that in the time of the birth and or in the time of the actual pregnancy, that is the only time that I can see a reason for the viewpoint as to that choice. That 9-month period is pretty much it. That's it. But that's through the doctor as far as that's concerned. And I have other viewpoints to that as far as medical concerns and or, of course, if there's any actual assault. And then in that turn, I have the belief that, yes, if the female has made the choice to go forward with that. But that's only if she chooses to do so. Now, I have brought up that I had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, and I was in a coma for a while, and I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain. It took 8.5 years to dissipate. And in that reality of mine, I gave birth to my son less than a year and a half after waking up from my coma, and I gave birth to my daughter less than 2.5 years after waking up from my coma, after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, which was during the time frame that the subarachnoid hemorrhage was in the frontal lobe of my brain. I made the choice, despite how I wound up off of the military installation, despite the Justice of the Peace situation, despite that, my choice was to keep my children. Unlike what certain types as to those hypotheticals thinking they would ever know any better than I would as to what would be best for my son and my daughter and I, such as the Democratic Party and those types in their opinion, which, yes, I understand that opposite viewpoint where the radical right would not think about about that at all. And see, that's a different situation regarding Roe versus Wade. Because individuals, as to their religious viewpoints, well, they don't actually have that right to interject in that regard if, such as in my situation, if it was my choice to keep my son and my daughter. And so in either capacity, those medical factors are non-religious. I do have a religious background, however, it's not through any religious viewpoint as to my choice to have delivered my son and delivered my daughter. And so in any of those hypotheticals of thinking incorrectly to use my son and or my daughter in that capacity, no, you didn't have that right. Ever. My son and my daughter are my son and my daughter. They are not political pawns. That certain types of those people that don't ever think because they have one situation occur and, oh, cheerleading, or, oh, this, no. Absolutely not. I did bring up in reference to there is in Carrollton a mosque nearby McCoy Elementary School, and how I had noticed that. I know that there are peaceful in comparison to radicalized on whichever side. Whichever one. So that's why there's a difference between peaceful, balanced religions compared to certain types. And so in that hypothetical, either way, I had the right to choose. Now, yes, I had issues in regards to other aspects. Haven't denied that. However, I actually made the choice to keep my son and my daughter. I made the choice to raise my son and my daughter. I made that choice. No one made that choice for me. I made that choice. Any individual that decided to think that they knew better than what I knew for myself, well, see, that's a problem. So there's those updates to my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, through my website, www.susanmilay.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. So in the tri-state area, mainly in the 5 boroughs, the Pittsburgh and Philadelphia areas of Pennsylvania, mainly in those spots, there were large issues in the 1980s and 1990s. A lot of the stuff in regards of my first book, Finding a Silver Lining, in the book section of my website, www.susanmilay.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com, so that Justice Court of the Supreme Court of the United States of America, ruling last month in June of 2022, there were a lot of situations in the overall areas of New York City and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A lot of those situations in Finding a Silver Lining were going on in the 1980s and 1990s in New York City, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Obviously, New York City is part of New York State. And so I made attempts as best as I could to explain things beforehand. Individuals huge problem. And I've brought this up in prior official YouTube videos of mine, as well as my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, through my website, www.susanieling.com, which is the same as www.ladydoribelle.com. Now, I acknowledge utilizing metaphors or reference points or analogies or what have you to be capable to relate to the information, such as this. Such as this particular situation. And being in the state of Texas and the rise of the Democratic Party in the state of Texas, where they seem to think that they know better in comparison to asking. They automatically assume same thing regarding the Republican Party. Both sides. It's very easy, if you genuinely care to know the answer, to ask the actual individual with respect, whether or not you respect them or whether or not you respect their choices. It does not change the fact that in order to be mature and actually have a discussion, it requires that you respect everybody in the area. As to that, you respect yourself enough to not stir up a scene needlessly in some overdramatic way. If you actually want to discuss the details, if you want to, if you are only doing in reference to a temper tantrum, that is not respect. If you do certain choices, it is that reality. So when you make the choice, such as stirring up needless drama, going for a reference I will give, I was informed when I showed up to Steel Creek Country Club in Tacoma one evening that as soon as walking in, the individual had pointed out that he thought that that was Dana Marino. And I had said, well, even if it is, she's eating. Now, I do like her. I do respect her work. And in that respect to her and respect to her work, I just, if, well, then that's one thing. But I am not going, especially while she's eating, I'm not going to disrespect the cooks who made her food in this particular explanation. I'm not going to disrespect those cooks. Not going to disrespect the wait staff that brought her and her table their food. Not going to disrespect them. I'm not going to disrespect the bus boys or bus girls, what have you, that would have to clean that up as far as in the reference to the Kavanaugh situation. I'm not going to disrespect that. I'm not going to disrespect the individuals that she maybe could be sitting with. I'm not going to disrespect her herself either. Now, granted, this was during 2016, and the time frame of 45, and shortly thereafter were a few situations similar to what the news report that I'll have the link to for the video clip as to how that stirred up immediately shortly thereafter. And that's important because though I respect her and though I respect her work, I wouldn't know if I actually met her in person, face to face in person. However, because she was eating, I'm truthfully also not that type of a person in that way where it disrespects in that capacity. I have been known before to go up to people when not eating and not in the capacities of what was described, and just politely, or if that isn't understood as to politeness as etiquette, politeness as respect, politeness as maturity, okay? And I had kept a distance between the individual at the table she was with, and I had asked if I could ask a question respectfully or politely. And the response was, at that particular event, as the response was. Now, her and her table's choice to be the way they were, there wasn't food, there wasn't even a drink on the table. For that clarification. Sure, they were at a picnic table, but it was an event, and that wasn't there. It was just sitting at the table and talking outside. And so, in that reference, despite that, and at a specific two, respecting the individual who held the event, respecting the other people at the table by asking politely, respecting all the others throughout the rest of that particular event, I went to ask one question. I did not raise my voice. I did not stir up needless drama. What occurred shortly thereafter between a different individual who has a military background, who was wearing his motorcycle vest, as far as having to get on the patio table, sitting on it, it was outside, it was evening, to that situation because of between the capacities of was literally because of that democratic individual. That and their little types as to their viewpoints and having proudly voted for 44, I can respect the office of the presidency of the United States of America, which translates to respecting the individual themselves. In turn, because of that, manners or mannerisms, the way I hold and carry myself, despite some people claiming that being confrontational when I know the difference in confrontational, um, that was not confrontational. That was just asking a question, and then the response was, as it was, in the reference to later that evening as to those two biological females having been at that specific table, as well as in reference to this situation in regards to the link as to the Fox and Friends episode regarding the Supreme Court Justice for the United States of America, Judge Kavanaugh, as to that, if as to how it was reported, that reference, there are ways to approach with etiquette and respect. Again, I did not vote for 44 or Barack Obama, then President of the United States of America. I didn't vote for him. I acknowledged that. I've also dealt with certain things, but nonetheless, I acknowledged it. I still respected his office and his administration. I didn't ever do anything to stir up any needless drama regarding. I made attempts in regards to other factors in reference to my scuba diving. That, on the other hand, was the choices of individuals who made the choices they did. However, I made the attempts I did because who would I ask? And other than scuba divers, as to those factors, Houston to the Navy Marine Special Warfare Unit. Other than those two groups, in that time frame, who would that be to ask? And so because I could post the images of my pictures, but because of my own knowledge and the situations at the time, those who have read the updates in regards of my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, and or new, and my journal blog is on my website, www.susanelane.com, which is the same as www.ladydoribell.com. Those who have read that and or discussions with me in person, face-to-face in person, such as the Civilian Sector Recreational Food Hours, I was invited to attend Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment. Yes, I acknowledge sometimes I mess up words, but I also don't read from a teleprompter. I do not read from a script at all. When my headaches turn to migraines, or when I have a headache that has migraine spikes in pain, or if I just have a low-level migraine, though what a low-level migraine to me is, after having dealt with this since the year 2000, is relative to what you'd consider. So because I actually had to learn how to describe it as to the levels of, or the length of time, I know my pain level differences as far as that's concerned. And so in that regard, I haven't ever denied that either. Other people have not been capable to pay attention to those details because they thought whatever they thought. They interpreted however they interpreted. And so in the reference, using the metaphor of if it actually was Miss Perina or Miss Dana, the reality too is in that respect. Now, if after they had finished eating, if after that sort of stuff, because I am clumsy, I can trip and fall. And again, because of being respectful and because I grew up how I grew up, I don't like wasting food. If I waste food, it's either because of whatever stomach issues and or pain levels, and it's not on purpose ever, especially with how I grew up. So in that particular reference point, even though, yeah, sure, I wouldn't be disrespectful, though, because I know how I am. I wouldn't want to be in that capacity of accidentally whatever. It's just one of the realities of knowing myself. And so afterwards, that's one thing. That's completely different. But that wasn't brought up later in that particular regard. Now, I've brought up in reference to that I volunteer, or at that time I was volunteering at Club Sapphire. Completely different, because I'm not an employee. So being a volunteer, that's different than being an employee. An employee has specific hours, and yes, I usually showed up before the event. And at the event, I usually did run around and hear because I could tell that something needed to be taken care of, and I just took care of it. Though I had discussions with people as well. And the ease for me to take my badge off was just as easy for me to put it on. However, because I don't ever assume anybody really knows who I am, except there is the reality I had been in what is supposed to be considered the adult consenting lifestyle in other areas, such as the state of Texas, and the comparison to Washington State. And in the state of Texas, there were only, well, there were 3 locations specifically that had required a scanning of an identification card. And so because of that, and then Washington State and what have you, the updates in regards to 2019 into 2020, 2021, and this year, 2022. It's just the reality. But I also have had certain knowledge, and going back to the 1980s and 1990s, certain situations. Now, some corporations, companies, so on and so forth, were more lenient than others because they were whatever company they were. They had whatever background as to, just as long as was honest about it. Didn't have to go and, broadcast it per se in comparison to this, obviously. However, as long as they were honest about it, there wasn't the problem of what is known as the morality clause. And that's it. It was over. It wasn't a big deal. It was as it was. And as long as it did not impact their work, as long as they remained moral and ethical, because just because of being involved, well, you had to maintain and sustain certain standards. And so in those particular references as to those situations, it had to be, of course, within what is considered the consenting above the biological age of 18 at the very minimum, but in that area because of that particular lifestyle regarding BDSM and or swingers, 21 was the minimum that most larger businesses had preferred because of the just in case aspects of them still being in high school. And that was a no-go automatically regarding those morality clauses. 100%. So, in reference to how certain types in the tri-state area, what they would do is try to give excuses in the senior year or whatever aspect of it. It wasn't acceptable in any capacity. And so, I'm not going to say that was a part of the attacks on the 11th of September in 2001, because I don't have proof of that. I wouldn't be surprised regarding certain individuals as to their particular family values. However, that is as it is because of the required permission is from one person in my family as far as my son and my daughter. Only one person asks. Not allowed to ask anybody else, no matter what. I'm the one and only person to ask. And while some might wish going to the DFW cemetery, no, that doesn't count. You're not allowed. If you actually appreciate life and want life to progress forward, you have one person to ask, and that is the facts. It is mandatory, period, and end of story. There's no other allowance, no matter how much some might wish. It's always been that way. Officially, in regards, yes, of 2008, though it was already agreed to. So the irony is, if you have had whatever viewpoint as to my dead ex-husband, well, the irony of ironies is the contract he and I had as far as my son and my daughter. So there's no one who's allowed to make any capacities of, no matter what they might wish. Big important deal. Important. And so I know some people might wish whichever aspect of, no. So anyway, in regard to the links in the information section for this official YouTube video of mine. So I have had these different situations as to the Democratic Party, the far left, where certain opinions or interpretations as to how they think as far as. Now, they themselves, though, do they themselves have the actual experience? They themselves. Same thing on the far right. Do they themselves have these experiences? They themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if in certain references as to child psychologists and that particular situation, I didn't personally like that regarding what had occurred in reference to, obviously I did the best I could, though in the time frame because of what McCoy Elementary School at the time in 2008, literally only because of that, was the reason where I had started making attempts to get my daughter some in that assistance because of what the children were doing at behest of the biological adults that were supposed to be volunteers and or the staff members as to McCoy Elementary School in Carrollton, Texas, of Carrollton Farmers Branch Independent School District. So if any individual of those biological adults went to a child psychologist or a psychologist in their early teenage years for just whatever, social integration or something in that capacity, there's that to take in consideration. Because that's the parent's job, that's the, religious organization that's supposed to, if they genuinely care, as to that. Now I know that over the years there have been certain problems with that, but then think about that as to child psychologists. And so, in regards of McCoy Elementary School, I did not speak with the guidance counselor about my daughter and my son's situation because there was no need for her involvement because she wasn't teaching my son or my daughter in class each day. There was no need for a mediator. That would be ignorant of her, as to Angela Ryder, to ever think that she would have any capacity to that. But then think about that regarding child psychology. And so in that hypothetical, because those types prefer that type of bureaucracy in comparison to speaking with the teacher directly, in person, face-to-face, in person, in comparison. Because those types of, I'm going to guesstimate as to elementary school guidance counselor types, they want to be in the business when it's none of their business. They probably come from a larger family too, whether they themselves are in a large family or they have a lot of cousins in comparison. And that in itself is a problem regarding that. Asher Holmes Elementary Schoolers and I would be capable to go over a few situations as to that sort of aspect, which was why a lot of the Democratic policies began to really stir up. Because despite not realizing, those factors are Republican ideals. So Northern Democrats are very different than Southern Democrats. And so these were people who were coming up from the South and the Midwest to the tri-state area and wanting information from children. And these needless problems from those types of Southern Democrats, remember the history of the Democrats in the South compared to the history of the Democrats in the North. And so those types tried what they did, and some children, such as myself, informed as to what was occurring. My biological father got enraged because of the smoking situation. That enraged him because of that. His lunch bag with like celery and whatever of that and that. I dealt with that because I should not have thrown away that carton of cigarettes. You know, it is as it is. You know, that one, hey, I messed up. I can acknowledge. I can acknowledge. Now I acknowledge, especially having been a smoker. Yeah, I know that's, I can acknowledge. Yeah, I can. I haven't had a real cigarette in a while. However, nonetheless, I still can acknowledge that because I know myself. And so in this reference, I also know how much better of a mood I am when I have that warmth of the flame. Yeah. That warmth of the flame. It's something that's better for me personally. But nonetheless, you know, there's all those Democrats as to those types of those, just, you know, those types where they think that they're doing something and they're not, except for stirring up needless problems. Because again, you know, where it's actually important, such as like scuba diving and the water, you know, because how does weather occur? Is weather associated with like the oceanic and bodies of water, and then go in the air, or you know, you'd think that there would be that common sense. Why would you go to, there's the Latin word breakdown of the word disease, so dis and ease, so the lack of ease. And so, you know, well, sure there is whatever as far as tobacco, but there are plenty of people who have smoked cigarettes, rolled their own cigarettes, and haven't had any problems. Did you ever think about the water as to the tobacco plants, or was that something that wasn't thought about? Would you ever think about like the pesticides, as far as that's concerned, how that's done as far as gardening, or would it just be just pointing that out there, you know, for those types that want to say whatever they want to say. And then, you know, you go and put additives in there. You butcher about, what? Okay. So just pointing that is common sense. I've brought this up before. Anyway, as far as that's concerned, so the viewpoint to the respect, it's a difference. Now, obviously, there's a difference to my Medal of Honor Art Project trip because you wouldn't have permission to ever ask my son that regard at all. Not even for the trip in regards of the first of two trips in 2017. You wouldn't even have that right. And anybody who would and do that, you have to blame yourself. You don't blame my son. That's your fault. That's on you. That's you don't have the right. Those regards. And so if any individuals contacted my son, didn't have permission, because, you know, there's a pattern of behavior. You know, people say that there's the passive aggressiveness in certain areas. You know, with the way certain Democrats are, as far as the news reports, I don't really see that passive aggressiveness. I see that more on the right in comparison, because despite my disagreement as to how certain things are done, you know, the Democrats seem to go directly up to how they choose to act. That's their choice. However, it seems to be certain ones on the right that tend to be, you know, dishonest, because only someone who would be honest would be direct and to the point in that capacity, though you have to have manners in that reference. And so in that regard, as to the Republican aspect, you know, that honesty, there's nobody who ever asked me about my scuba diving. There's nobody who asked me about what occurred in the water. I made attempts too. Those individuals didn't have any need to speak with me according to their choices as to their words. Because what would they have anything to, because of how I physically looked? So if it's the reverse, as to the Republicans in the Carrollton, Texas area, because of their whatever viewpoint, hypothetically. Don't know whether or not you could get voting records back in the year of 2008. And if you could, and they were too lazy to, well then look at what they did, as far as that's concerned, in the state of Texas. Not hypothetical. Then, reference, I'm just pointing that out there. Facts are facts. So in the regards to, I dealt with it from both sides. Because if both sides would have just, balanced themselves out equally in comparison to what I dealt with. So, just pointing that out there. Nonetheless, as to the Supreme Court decision of the United States of America to be about life going forward. So then, in that reference, that would translate to speaking with me about my son and or my daughter and or my work. That's where that translation would be, because of, being anti-abortion, so there's no life regarding that. It's not that. I do have resurrection capabilities. I haven't denied that. Again, my Medal of Honor art project as to the historical and spiritual rubbings, and more so in regards of the spiritual aspects, the spirit of the Medal of Honor itself. And so in those particular references, because of, as I have explained in prior official YouTube videos of mine, as well as in the updates as to my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmealing.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. There, and in the book section, specifically finding a silver lining that you can click the link on to go in reference to Amazon to purchase it, and the modern day book in that particular reference as to clicking on the link to purchase through Amazon, though also the 3-book series, The Adventures of Susan Mealing, Scuba Diver Extraordinaire. That particular, because of distinguishing differences. And so, so there's Irving in 2011, and there's San Antonio as far as 2004, and there's Indiana in 2009, and then there's the house backyard in New Jersey that I grew up in, as far as those situations. So those are just a few regarding in the year 2020. President of the United States of America 45, Donald J. Trump, had signed into office the U.S. Space Force officially, along with NASA having been around for a while. So, because of who was I going to speak with after everything I already had dealt with by that point in time? Sorry, well, I'll just hear the books, I'll go work on my Medal of Honor art project, artwork, and stuff like that, because, if people read it, they'll just ask me, and be honest doing so, because that's totally common sense. I don't camo. I'm, in person, face-to-face in person, just, have etiquette and respect. And etiquette, it doesn't matter if you're in a relationship or not. It just, having, the politeness, please, thank you, sort of thing. Having that etiquette doesn't always require in what is supposed to be considered the adult consenting lifestyle, as far as, if you're just in that heathenistic viewpoint of that in comparison to just a regular discussion. Because I can look at others in a platonic manner. I can acknowledge physical attraction as far as their physical what have you. That doesn't translate to me personally being sexually attracted to them. That's just that I can find them physically attractive. That doesn't translate to their entire physical. It could be one or two aspects of, such as their eyes or their hair, or maybe they have a whatever type of clothing on. That's it. That's simple. That doesn't translate to being sexually attracted to. That's a different problem regarding perception or interpretation. That interpretation. Yeah. So, So, in that particular reference, yeah, important. Important. So, just think, what does that, so for those who are into perception, if they went to my daughter and or my son about anything in comparison to speaking with me as to my work, how old was my son and or my daughter, and were they underneath the age of 21 years old? As to if you have any direct connection yourself to what is supposed to be considered the consenting adult lifestyle. So if you are a part of the BDSM and or LGBTQP and or the swinger community, if you are, and in any capacity of sending someone that would be the equivalent of a honeypot to my son and or my daughter, just think about that, okay? How many years old? And keep that in mind. Could have just spoken with a biological adult with maturity. Yeah, I don't know how long that's been considered as possibly normal. I don't know how that would be considered as normal, though I also don't see how that'd be considered as common sense either. That's the other aspect. That's my personal viewpoint. So, but that's how I personally view that. So then, yes, I know in the Hollywood aspects and certain other situations, they have that in comparison. They also have a lot of situations in California, don't you think? Regarding, I mean, there was this huge billboard sign, "Don't California, Texas." And so maybe that sign was for everybody in the state of Texas as to, have etiquette and respect. I mean, you can have etiquette towards yourself. You can have respect towards yourself. So, if you know what your ethics and morals are, well, you have your etiquette and whatever level of respect that you have for yourself. So, in regard to, politeness, when interacting with another individual in person, face to face in person, well, that's your level of whatever level of comparison. And so, in regards to certain factors, just speak with. Etiquette and respect. So simple. So simple. So very simple. It really, truthfully is. I have thought so, though I didn't really ever think about it not being until 2019, into 2020, into 2021, and this year of 2022. Because, it's just that simple. So there's two people on the uh, Fox and Friends video link reference that have a military background. You get in less trouble just asking directly than if you don't. Yeah, it's a big thing. Yeah. They do have, in the military, they do have a thing about where, if you can't go directly, you do what you can to go, if you can, directly to. So, like, for example, if you have a squad capacities, again, the spirit of the Medal of Honor. And so, sure, at this point in time, nobody can actually truthfully say that I haven't been supportive during whichever presidential and vice presidential um, political affiliation, because take in consideration that I've been working on my Medal of Honor art project for as long as I have. Started it in 2014, but the first portions of the completed pieces in 2015. Who is the Vice President of the United States of America? What is her gender? I mean, I utilized a hint that's not a hint. And so I began my associate or, connected portion as to my Dr. Mary Edwards Walker collection aspects. And so in that reference, there's those viewpoints as to the spirit of the Medal of Honor award. And so with the additional factors as to connected to my Medal of Honor art project, artwork, then there's that to take in consideration. Because of common sense. Because obviously, both ways, I mean, it depends on however you view that, though the reality is, as the reality is. So both aspects as to, because, and you have it where I began my Medal of Honor art project during the year 2014. 44 was still in office. 44 was still in office in 2015. 44 also was still in office in 2016. It wasn't until 2017 that 45 went through the inauguration. Just pointing that out there. Don't know if anybody realized that arithmetic. And so throughout the time frame, still worked on it. Common sense. And so in the time frame of either 2015 or 2016, I know there was a point in time where, when working on my Medal of Honor art project, I had this before, and so okay, let me send a message directly to, and sent the message regarding Medal of Honor guys as far as what I was working on at that particular time. The aspects of were like, sent the message that, for those who believe in that, as far as that's concerned. It's mediumship. And so, then I went back to my work. Because that's just how it goes. Especially when I'm in the middle of stuff like that. And it's actually quite difficult to get me to pay attention to you. You actually have to, it's an in-person, face-to-face in-person thing. Otherwise, I'll just keep doing my own stuff. Because I'm my way. My way is my way, is my way, is my way. And if I don't have, I know myself when I work on stuff like that. The energetic factors, yeah. So at the times of like Club Sapphire, that would have been the time to actually speak with me. In comparison, that would have been at that point in time. Could have taken off the badge. I mean, I still talked about my Medal of Honor art project stuff, though other factors in that comparison. So if it was ever actually needed in that capacity, in whatever reference. Nonetheless, otherwise I just do things my way, and that's just how it is. Especially when it comes to my Medal of Honor art project or scuba diving or what have you. Nonetheless, still, 3 years of 44's presidency. Just putting that out there. And then you also have the aspects as to my scuba diving, especially in the Atlantic area of the oceanic waters. Yeah, didn't really pay attention to the, elected official background, so that's just alright, I got stuff to do. I'll go handle that. lobster bisque. You know, it is as it is. Because, you know, it is as it is. Fine. Just do my thing. Go handle stuff and then, you know, go be a mom. Because that's as I do. And so then later, in regards to those factors of, after the 2020 election cycle began, well, the reality of the situations. So you can take a, pun intended, 2020 look back now, in the year 2022. And the merger that had occurred on the 6th of June 2022 between cell phone companies, I wasn't officially made aware of that until whatever the first posting of that in my journal blog because of something I had noticed regarding at a store. And so that's that, as far as that's concerned. And it's not that my Medal of Honor guys, as I refer to them as, it's not as though they disapproved of, it was more along the lines of there was a lot of stuff that needed to be taken care of. So as you look through the journal blog updates information, my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, through my website, www.susanieling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. If you take a review from 2019 into 2020 into 2021, now in the year of 2022, I would guesstimate you could see that. But then there's also the facts that 45, you know, there's New York City. And then there's that 20-year memorial that was on the 11th of September in 2001. And, you know, each individual deals with things their own way. And whether they choose to discuss that in that capacity as to the individuals they personally knew or whatever, some of them may make the choice to not, even if they might have to, and if they're in a specific role. So something such as the viewpoint of. And so in the general public, that's more in that reference, in that comparison to certain individuals, especially that have the direct capacities of. Now, that does not detract from the reality as to 46 having been in the Senate as long as he had. And not detracting from 45 in regards to whatever capacity, obviously, as to New York City. It's not detracting from either one. Though the 2020 time frame, that was a point where I wouldn't say it wasn't silent, that wasn't it. It's more along the lines of other factors as to which you can see through my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, through my website, www.susanieling.com. And so, for those references as to situations at that time frame, that reality of the importance as to the formation of the U.S. Space Force as brought forward in 2020. you know that there is the usage of technology for the Space Force in whichever capacity. You know that that's a reality. You may not know what the technology is, but you know that that's a reality. And so I did the best I could to explain what I could as best as I could. It's a lot that I was dealing with at that particular point in time. Not denying that at all, whatsoever. And so, in reference to, it was literally one of the largest points in time. Say, it was the 2020 election in the time frame of is in the long term, into the longest term, going to be literally, and there is the pun intended, a turning point that will be seen in a much larger way than some might realize. And so, in that particular reference regarding that, in this time frame of 2022, whatever the viewpoint either side, 45, 46, even 44, 43, 42, so on and so forth, I think it's 39, and then all of the former and then the current Vice President of the United States of America. No, there are those factors and their families. So in those particular references, as to, it's not that there was any detraction one way or another in that difference to the time frame during the 2016 election. It was literally at that time frame where it was, this is important, and this is all I could do, um, you know, in comparison. And the reason why I give this as a metaphor is it's not the same to send a message, although maybe, I don't know, because I could I also don't know because I'm me, so common sense to me, being an ordained reverend, and then my background, okay, well, these guys say this as far as, and this is, if you know about mediumship or anything like that, you got Miss Melania, and I know that there's those particular factors as far as, and then you got, the children as far as, so, I don't know as far as religion, but, this is what they have to, so I'm just going to send that in comparison to, in regards of the adventures of Susan the Lake Scuba Diver Extraordinaire, as far as 44. That I acknowledge, which, again, the clarifications in 2019 and 2020 and 2021 into 2022, there are those situations which I would guesstimate, guiding 44 and 46, although technically both, in those time frames, well, that would be different, especially if I'm accurate regarding the merger portions, as to an irony of ironies, because in person, face-to-face in person. So I figured when, and this is in my defense, I don't know if I actually need to give a defense on this, but in my defense, it was, well, if civilian and recreational scuba divers don't know, well then I'll just go to the Navy Marine Special Warfare Unit after I get some stuff, because I got, and I've already brought up in reference to Hawaii, as far as those guys, so it's like, okay, I gotta make sure my son and my daughter are taken care of, already went through, because obviously in regards to going to the Navy and Marine Special Warfare Unit and bringing in my scuba dive gear back, I gotta make sure my son and my daughter are taken care of, otherwise, then you have that. A responsible mom would do that, I'm just saying. And so then there's Carrollton to San Antonio, Texas, Military City, USA. I figured it was common sense, though there is the irony. In regards to 2008, I told my biological aspects, I told them that I had concerns, that I knew that he was going to become president of the United States of America. I knew it. I knew he was. Even the marriage situation, I knew he was. I knew he was going to become president of the United States of America. And he did. He became 44, as far as that's concerned. However, I had a concern. I didn't realize the irony of as it was, and but the issues of not understanding military cuts. As far as that's concerned, yeah, because figured law enforcement, especially upper law enforcement, might have certain difficulties of explaining certain things. Such as laws of the ocean regarding compared to the on land, and then, keeping people on land safe from, stuff like lobster bisque. But at the same time, here, look. Or, keeping safe from like Bobo and Toto and stuff like that for, other reference points. That is as it is. Lake Travis 2009. That is as it is. As long as that wasn't really, whatever. This is that. So I'm just throwing that out there. Just went and was I an actual ninja? I never think about this until right now. Was I an actual ninja? Like, was I total ninja camo and ninja? Was that total ninja in 2009? Was I total ninja? Was I like, whoa? Was I all ninja and stuff? I didn't think about that till right now. I was like, total ninja. Was I ninja? Was I all ninja? I'm like, I didn't really think about that till right now. I don't know if I was total ninja or not. I was just doing my stuff. I just kind of figured, right, I'll make the tips that I can, and, irony. I didn't, although, who knew? So was I all camo? Was that what it is? I was total camo? It's like total ninja camo? Like, and I wasn't even, it would be so funny if I was total ninja camo but was not hiding. And just, why hasn't anybody asked me? This is so weird. In my thoughts and stuff, what is going on? Why can't I just, if I could just get this gear, if I could take it to this location, it's the Navy Marine Special Warfare Unit. It would be so easy to get this footage. I went to Marine, I took the test, and it's just this stuff. So weird. Well, that was a bit prophetic in 2008 year of election, I suppose. Nonetheless, I guess so. So anyway, I don't know though. I mean, that could have been 46 as far as that's concerned, because it depends on the situation. Because, that's how it is. So, that'd be interesting. What can I say? Other than the truth, that's pretty much it. So that'd be irony. That would be irony. Nonetheless, I literally called that. I did. At the table. And yeah, well, Yeah, I'll cut your food for you. No, that's fine. Yeah, no, I just have the sensation that he's gonna let me cut your food. No, I have the sensation that when he becomes president, he's just not gonna understand how military stuff is as far as certain things are concerned, and then law enforcement and stuff like that. As far as this is concerned, yeah, I just have this, weird little sensation that, maybe he's just gonna, it's not gonna be understood if certain things are concerned as far as that. And so, that'd be, that is irony at this point. I'm it's probably that bureaucracy. That's probably what that is. It's probably all the bureaucracy instead. That could be a situation. And yeah, I'm fairly direct. But then it depends on who you speak with. Because then it's the, oh, well, come in, let's go and talk and compare. Yeah. Yeah, there's that bureaucracy. I guess maybe it's not really politics I have a problem with, it's the bureaucratic. I think that's what that is. I think that's the problem, the bureaucracy. Because politics, I guess, I mean, I don't really, I mean, yeah, it's the bureaucracy. Yeah, because of all the bureaucratic stuff. And yeah, I think that's what it is. Politics, maybe. Well, I can discuss it because of the Latin definition, the Greco-Roman Latin. But it's the bureaucratic process. Yeah, no, thank you. The bureaucratic process. No. Thanks, but no thanks. Not interested in that bureaucratic process. Just direct and to the point. It's so much easier. Really is. Not as many misunderstandings as far as that's concerned. You can actually ask questions direct, but when you have to have a meeting to, ask for a meeting and then have another meeting to ask for a different meeting before you can have a meeting with the meeting to schedule the actual meeting, but you have to have another meeting of a meeting because with that meeting, then you have a meeting before you can discuss what the details are because you have to have the background clearances for that meeting. And then you can have the meeting where another meeting occurs to then go and get a calendar. Yeah, and then when you get the calendar, then you have to have a meeting to look at the calendar together, but you have to schedule a meeting with the meetings. Boy. This is why when people claimed that they knew what the 9/11 Commission report, as far as that was concerned, it was, you sure about that? I don't know. I don't know. That was in. No, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know. I don't know. No, I don't know. I don't know. What was it? I think they said something like 2002 it came out, or 2003, like the whole investigation. The whole investigation for the attacks on 11th of September 2001, huh? I didn't believe that. I don't know why anybody, and this is why I had my view. It's like, why would do you know how big New York City buildings were? Do you know, like, you have no concept, do you? And so then I learned that they only had the pop culture references, and it's like, yeah. If you could see so I'm going to give this as an example. So you have my scuba diving pictures as to lob and stir abyss, as far as that's concerned. You have the water distortion because so I don't know what people thought the size was of them. They're not like lobster tanks at Red Lobster or anything. I did listen to an official YouTube video regarding a comedy. I'll add that one in here. But nonetheless, as far as the information section, no, it's not one of those. No. If you were to go to the Bremerton shipyard and take the Nimitz, put all of so there's the Kitty Hawk, the Nimitz, and then there's like 3 or 4 other boats. If you were to put them side by side, and then you were to measure the distance of the length across I think the 3 to 5 of those boats in total, you'd probably have 2.5 of the size of the area regarding who I call lob and stir and bisque. About 2.5, maybe 2 3/4. So that forming underwater volcano regarding the scale size, however you know, or volcanoes, as far as how close I had been, but also how far I had to be to get the proper viewpoint. So in that comparison to New York City, well, if you have, which obviously there are, if you have pop culture references, as to backdrops. And if you can look, I'm going to guesstimate, if you can look more than 2 blocks of a street area as to what pop culture references to New York City, you probably, if you could see the rooftop, more than if within the 2 blocks you can see the rooftop of it, and they're like walking in the street, yeah, that's probably a Hollywood set in comparison to New York City itself. If you if within if it is less than, I mean, I don't, as a child, I don't remember a point in time where you could actually see the rooftops of the majority. Like you couldn't even see the top molding unless it was a church or a synagogue or a temple for the majority. So like the majority of the skyline ones, as far as skyscrapers, yeah, you couldn't see that walking like at all whatsoever. And like they just there's a picture on Wikipedia regarding Rockefeller Center, and you can see how that goes. Well, all of the skyscrapers were much taller, and that's only something like a, I think they said it's a 50, but I think that's something closer to 55 or 56 if you take a look at the certain sections as to the dimensions. Nonetheless, you can't see all the way to the top. So if you can actually see, in regards to your pop culture references for New York City of whatever, set thereof in the city of New York, if you can see that like top part of, like, yeah, no, you wouldn't see actual New York City on that. You'd see a set as far as a Hollywood set regarding that. I would guesstimate. I don't know. I mean, that's just like, did you see potholes? Did you like in the New York City sort of thing? If you didn't see a bunch of cracks and stuff like that in the roadway, or like manhole covers, like that's a tell. If you didn't see, like, because manhole covers are in the street, they're not on the sidewalk usually in New York City back in the 1980s and 1990s. The majority of manhole covers were in the street. That's where a large amount of issues were. It was a big deal because people would park with like the nose of their car, so then, because like fire hydrants and stuff like it was. Yeah. So if you watch your pop culture stuff and you don't see, yeah, and then there's the subway systems. If you didn't see like multiple subways, like if let's say they walked, I'll give the a reference. If in whatever pop culture, if they walked more than 3 blocks anywhere in the 5 boroughs, and you didn't see a minimum of 1 to 2 large subway entrance areas, and it's before 2001, yeah, I don't know where, I don't, but then again, if you're not born and raised going up to that area as often, that wouldn't even register. And then, I mean, I guess if actually watching the whatever show in comparison to the details as to that, well, then that's different as far as that's concerned, I would guesstimate. So, yeah, that's there you go on that. Because, yeah, I mean, you talk with people who were born and raised going from New Jersey up to that area, or they had business where they commuted from New Jersey to New York City. And yeah, you could easily, they'd easily be capable to look at whatever pop culture reference and be like, yeah, no, you can't, you probably can't even do that now. Even though the difference is to the New York City skyline, with the Rockefeller Center tower viewpoint, for one example, you can't even technically do that now with that size, and that's only a 50 something story building in comparison to something like the World Trade Center or the World Trade Center Plaza. The World Trade Center and the World Trade Center Plaza, there's more than just the Twin Towers. There are quite a few, as far as that was concerned, that were close to the height. I mean, there were several that were close to that height. There were
there were a few that, if I remember correctly, there were only maybe 10 floors of difference as to the size to the World Trade Center Twin Towers that are more well known as to the attack on the 11th of September in 2001. It's a big deal. I don't know what pop culture references though, so others would as far as that's concerned. Now, in regards of the 20 year, well, you know, some individuals choose how they choose regarding that, and the 20-year memorial, um, there's that. Now, personally, it was the first time of, I'd only been out to the East Coast for the first time to New Jersey in the 19th year of since the attack, but it had been since 1998 since I had been to the area, and I needed to get to an area where I could actually recognize the evening skyline. I mean, I did drive through a few areas, but I needed to do things my way in comparison to. I mean, I was going to do things my way, though I had to in a different capacity, but nonetheless, um, that 20-year time frame to those situations, then when you take the viewpoint of the combination of the year 2020 election and all that, I mean, certain regards, the possibility of the COVID situation to the knowledge of other people as to the merger regarding that and that comparison. And so that was this year, the 6th of June, 2022. So you had that viewpoint. And so, though I can say I'm obviously not the only one who's excited regarding the Alaska rally that was on Rumble regarding that for the viewpoint of. And there's that. As far as the 2024 election, that's the next of the president race of the United States of America with the vice president of the United States of America. And so, but this year, I mean, there's an election each year. Every year is an election year officially. Whether it's a local election, whether it's a state election, whether it's a federal election, there's elections each and every year. I don't know how many people didn't know that, but that's the reality. So each and every year there are elections. I personally, I have the knowledge of myself enough that if I personally am not from an area in regards of local election, I don't really like to mess with that because the local election individuals are in the knowledge of what they and their people need. And I don't mind getting involved in regards to the state level because that's the entirety of combined. And federal level, I have I have my viewpoints, and so that's the way I look at things. However, when it comes to a new area completely, like haven't ever, whatever as to, I personally I do have this pattern of behavior, especially to the local area if I don't have personal experiences to whatever capacity.
I will steer clear of that. And that's not in any offense to any of the individuals that are running. That is more in reference to the way um, I know how certain things can be. And so if, and this is my viewpoint, if I have the sensation that individuals are still working on how to um, discuss their particular viewpoints without um, where they're still truthful, though because of certain millennial types, and knowing that no matter what, there's always going to be, to a degree, certain situations, but doing the best to actually lower that sort of situation, such as the Kavanaugh aspect when out to dinner, as far as that's concerned, to the U.S. Supreme Court. There are those particular situations where, in that report, as to those points in time. And because of knowing that sometimes the situations can be, um, because of this time frame in 2022 being different in comparison to prior years as well. No matter where you are, though, especially certain locations, as to a viewpoint which gives individuals their capacity to speak on their own, which is always what it's supposed to be. It's the freedom that you're supposed to have regarding that. And what works best is what works best. But similarly, 45 is the only one who can be 45. And so each individual has to feel comfortable within themselves as to those factors. And so that's another situation to those particular viewpoints. And so, especially with certain situations, I do the best I can. Where if, then I will. But it if the energetic portions are a certain way, I mean, even in the state of Texas, I was like this in 2001. But realistically, so 2001 through 2012 into 13, this is how I was. It wasn't just because of what I was dealing with at those times, though it partially was. And so that's the reality as to those situations, because let me take care of stuff, and if it's known, well, you know, just ask me, just let me know. Very, I don't want to assume I'm not approachable, because maybe, I don't know, but I would think I'm fairly approachable. It might be a little, I don't know. I don't need to approach myself. That would be kind of weird if I had to approach myself. I'm just saying. So, just throwing that out there. I mean, is it going to be? I don't know. I'm just putting that out there. But you know, I'm honest about that. So, in regards of the situations, there is that irony, though, that the U.S. Supreme Court, Roe versus Wade, overturning, where, you know, pro-life and in those capacities, well,
If in regards of certain situations, then why? Why would it be that would be a problem for individuals in the long run? Especially if, in regards to whichever side, if you are interested in certain types of movies or pop culture or video games, what then would really be the problem? If you know, in other ways, like wouldn't that be something that you were like, I don't know, I don't get into that sort of stuff, so I don't know. So because it's personal viewpoint. I, I just don't get into that though. So that's what other people and their aspects of and getting the, I guess it is a bit of courage in regards to. Maybe that's an additional portion. But I know in regards of my Medal of Honor art project, just to those particular factors, I very much do believe in reincarnation and the spirit of, mainly the spirit of the Medal of Honor itself. And so, and that courage that would be needed. It's not just, I mean, I guess that's what it's called. I heard the term before. I don't know if it's really called that or possibly. I don't know. Just did what I had to take care of, that's all. And so I had enough to take care of, so it was as it was. So, but in the regards of taking into viewpoint regarding the information section for the videos to review, we can, and listen to the comedy as well in regards to the two news clips regarding that, and then contemplate as to the reality that and it is truthful regarding, yeah, you can laugh and then also think about other avenues where you are capable, and if you can push yourself then do so, but etiquette and respect as far as that stuff's concerned. And so the reality, I really like how Greg Gutfeld and his show has evolved. Same thing with the Five. I already liked them before. I liked listening to them before a lot. And my viewpoint on that is because of the differences between individuals, and they actually have the capacity. I'm sure there's some it's not pre-scripted, though it's, these are the talking points, and that's how they go to some degree of. And I think that that's really important, in my opinion. I'm sure there might be some editing here and there, but it's still where that reality is brought forward as to the genuinity. And in my opinion, especially with 45, how 45 had been, and that's kind of certain viewpoints to take that consideration as well. And so I hope that makes sense, because they're still obviously themselves. So on Greg Gutfeld's show, each of the individuals similar to Red Eye and Gutfeld. Now, the show, individuals that go on the show, they're still capable of being themselves. They can actually speak clearly and go over the details of, and so on and so forth. Same thing on the Five, though, and with both shows, both the Five and Greg Gutfeld's show, you can see where even though certain aspects are as they are, they still have the capacity of having that intellectual debate while being respectful of one another and, working together. That's one of many reasons why I particularly like I like it. I think it's great because it brings that forward, and it really does show that yes, you can still learn from other shows on whichever news stations for this reference. The way in regards of debating um, without getting to a certain point does have the capacity to occur, and you can still have civility, and you can still bring that forward while, in whichever capacity, but within reason and having that respect and politeness, even if disagreeing on a topic, in my opinion. So, thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel. Like my official YouTube videos, subscribe to my official YouTube channel. If you're going to leave a comment, make sure to have etiquette and respect. Go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydoorbell.com. In that reference, as to my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, that's different, and yet not at the same time. There are similar discussion points, though the viewpoint of if you actually speak the exact same way when, so you have my official YouTube videos, if that's the exact 280 in every whatever, or if it's just as however it's viewed in comparison, then take that in consideration regarding the online aspects in that review, in which, in my opinion, as to how sometimes it is more important to have that. Um, this is more online in that comparison to in-person, face-to-face, in-person discussions. However, that does give that difference of a viewpoint. So those who have known me in person, face-to-face, in person, would be capable to say which one is more similar to when actually speaking with me in person, face-to-face, in person. Whether the informational, however, giving the opinions or what have you as to that, or when actually having a discussion, or in this reference, this is a lecture, monologue, sermon, however, it is Sunday, but in that reality, as to whether this is just pretty much the same, but the online in written word sometimes can be, however that would be reviewed to consider. So thanks for tuning in. Today is the 10th of July, 2022. You have a good day. 10 July 2022.